So when your best friend sends you a TikTok video with a dress that she really, really loves, you kind of have to start making plans to make her that dress at some point. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. For those of you who are new around here, my name is Madison. I'm a high school fashion design teacher, and here on YouTube I film sewing videos and tutorials to share my love and passion for fashion with you all. I am super excited about today's video because I'm not making a project for myself, which is very out of the ordinary considering that most of my videos are projects that I've made for myself. I get very emotionally invested and connected to my projects that it's super hard to part from them, but I do love making things for other people, and what better way than to make your best friend a dress for her birthday. So a couple of months ago, my best friend sent me a TikTok video. If you are anything like me and my friend, we send TikTok videos back and forth to each other literally all the time. But this one was specifically sent to me because she loved the dress in the video. So I call this the Waffle House elopement video. If you go onto TikTok and you search Waffle House elopement, it's probably going to be the first video that pops up. So it's a video that a photographer posted about this Waffle House elopement like photo shoot. So basically this bride and this groom just got married and they were going to take pictures at Waffle House, and the bride was wearing this super gorgeous but very simplistic, classic and simple knee-length kind of loose fitted dress, and my best friend really loved it, and that's what her caption was on the video. And I of course loved it because I thought it was a very classic piece, and so I decided that I would try my hand at replicating this dress and making it for her at some point. So her birthday is coming up in January.
So you might have realized that it is no longer January when I was originally planning to release this video. Here we are 3 months into the year and it is just now going live, but enjoy the process. This was a super fun dress to make.
And so I thought that I would take some time and try to attempt making this dress for her birthday, so I'm super excited. This is my first project in a really long time that I feel like I've made for someone, and also made for someone that they didn't know I was making it for them, so you kind of have to do like a lot of guesswork size wise, but I think this is all going to work out pretty well. Thankfully this dress, the style is one of those dress styles where it can almost fit multiple sizes because it is made like very loosely, which is super great because it takes like out all of the guesswork when it comes to fits and sizing per se. So we're going to attempt this with the additional mannequins that I have in my studio and kind of just guessing on a lot of things, taking some of my own measurements and adapting them, and then obviously just drafting this dress as close to the original as possible. So I'll pop a picture of the dress up right here. So this dress is a very simple classic color. It's kind of a khaki cream color. This fabric also looks like it kind of is a mid-weight fabric, and the fabric also looks like it's somewhat textured. So I went to Joann fabrics and tried to find a fabric that was close enough to the original color and that would work. I felt would work as well for this dress as possible. I was really toying with going with a more heavy kind of mid-weight fabric that had a lot more structure and body to it, but it wasn't quite the shade that I wanted, and it had zero texture, and I really kind of wanted to play off of the idea that the original dress had more texture. So I ended up buying two different fabrics. One I'm going to use for the lining to give the dress more texture, and the other one will be the outer fabric of the dress. So these are the two fabrics that I got. In this camera lighting, I feel like they look really, really white, but this one is definitely more of a khaki, and this is a very vanilla cream color that's going to be used for the lining. So this is just one of those like really stretchy polyester fabrics that's great for lining fabric. So we're going to use this to give the dress more structure and body, and we also have to use this because the fabric I decided to go with for the original dress is a little bit thinner and slightly sheer. It's not completely like a chiffon and sheer. It's just more of a crinkly kind of matte-ish satin, but I decided to go with this because I loved the texture on it, and the original dress did have texture, and I really loved that about it, and this was very close to the original shade. So we're going to try and see how well this fabric will work for the kind of overall shape and form of the original dress, but I think it will actually work pretty well, and I really think this will look really good with the pleats along the waist of the original dress and the very billowy puffy sleeves. So we're going to layer them over each other, and hopefully this will work out. So let's dive into designing.
So the main measurements for creating this dress were the chest or bust of the bodice, the length of the skirt, and the length of the sleeves, and you can see my measurements that I ended up using for this dress on the screen. So to make this dress, I actually ended up using pattern pieces that I had from a past project. I believe the bodice that I used was from my sheared dress video, and then the sleeve I ended up using was just a standard sleeve that I use for a lot of my projects. So since this dress is very much a loose fit, there aren't any really style features such as darts and gathers and things like that. It's very easy to kind of self-draft your own pattern just based off of widths and length measurements. So I ended up just using a bodice piece I already had, and I just folded up the bottom to shorten it lengthwise, and then I also folded the front so I could kind of shorten the torso width across. And then because I also wanted this to be a much looser fit, since that's what the original dress has, I added a couple of inches to the side seam so that there would be more room under the arm, so that it would kind of have a boxy fit. And I was also basing this off of just measurements that I had in my head of what I thought would fit my friend, since I was kind of going off of an idea of her size and using my size 8 mannequin, but it all ended up working out. After I cut my bodice, it was time to cut out my sleeve, so I'm just using a standard puff sleeve pattern that I have from past projects, and I'm cutting this on the fold so that when I open it, it will actually be doubled and have extra volume and be mirrored on both sides. And then for my sleeve, I also made sure to make it 25 inches long, since that's the length I'm going with. And later on in the video, you will see that I actually add a cuff to the end of my sleeve to really give it a nice balloon effect. So to create the cuff for the bottom of my sleeve, this is going to be a section of fabric that will make the bottom of my sleeve fitted to the wrist section. I cut my cuffs to be about 8.5 inches. That way they would be wide enough to kind of fit over your wrist, but also still fit on your arm. And I also cut out fusible interfacing to line the cuffs with so that they would have more structure. To create the skirt of this dress, you don't actually need a pattern piece like most of my dresses, because all you need is measurements. So to create this, I knew I wanted my skirt to be 22 inches long, so that is the length that I made my fabric. But in order to cut this, I actually folded my fabric over long ways instead of selvage to selvage. I wanted my selvage to be on the side seams, and then I just cut the fold at the top long ways across my fabric so that I would have two super wide pieces that were the width of standard fabric, about 45 inches, and then the length of 22 inches. But you can make the adaptations based on the skirt that you would like to have. After all of my main pattern pieces were cut out, I then went to cut out my lining, which was just to cut the exact same pieces but out of my lining fabric, which is kind of a stretchy knit polyester in a cream color. So I just decided to use my already created bodice, since I knew it was the perfect width and length and size, to cut out the lining for my bodice, and then I did the same thing for the sleeves. And then for the skirt, it was the same thing as well, except I always like my skirt linings to be a couple of inches shorter, so I made sure to cut it about 2 inches shorter than the actual outer part of my skirt. If you want to take a shortcut, you can figure out how to cut the lining of your skirt so that the selvage of the fabric is at the edge of your lining of your skirt, that way you don't have to hem it. Now it's time to start the construction process. First up, I adhered my fusible interfacing to the cuffs of my sleeves, that way those are ready to go whenever it's time to sew on the cuffs. And then I also gave all of my pattern pieces a nice little steamed press before I started pinning and sewing them together. For this dress, the bodice is only going to have a side invisible zipper, so when constructing it and sewing together, all I'm going to do is sew together one side of the bodice to start with.
Okay, so it's day 2 working on this dress, and I am still wearing the exact same thing I was wearing yesterday. But I thought I would walk y'all through my kind of construction process for this dress and kind of talk through all of the different sewing steps I'm going to take to construct and like connect it all together, because sometimes I feel like that gets lost in translation in my videos and my voiceovers. So I think I'm just going to talk you through it so you kind of know where my thoughts are, because especially when you are creating your own pattern, you have to figure out the steps and like what you're going to sew together first in order to make the piece come out as it should. So here's what that is. Okay, so we have all of the pieces cut out. This is the skirt outside, the skirt lining, the sleeves, sleeve cuffs with interfacing connected to them, top lining, and the top. So This is my thought process for sewing it together. This dress is going to have a side zipper, so I have to leave one of the sides of the bodice and the skirt open for the invisible zipper. So I went ahead and sewed these sides and serged them. My next thought is to pin them right sides together and sew the kind of neckline in a way. And I think I'm also going to try to insert the sleeves between the lining and the shell of the bodice instead of sewing them in at the very end. So that means I have to come over to my top. So that means I have to come over to my sleeves and kind of construct them before I can sew it into the bodice. So these sleeves, according to the original dress, actually have elastic up at the shoulders. So we're going to insert the elastic after we finish all of the edges. So kind of the sleeves together on the sides. And then we're also going to gather the bottom of these sleeves and sew the cuffs on. And I think that I might have to do a button and buttonhole on these cuffs because I'm not quite sure that they're going to fit over your hand. And if you cut them too large to fit over your hand, it's not going to fit well on the bottom of the sleeve. So I think that's what we're going to do, is do the bodice, sew it together right sides, attach the sleeve so that when you flip it to the inside, all the seams are hidden. And then we're going to start working on constructing and connecting the skirt to the lining, hem it, and there's a lot of pleats that we have to do in order to be able to connect it to the bodice.
So we're going to start off by sewing all of the side seams. So this is one side of the bodice. This is going to be all of the under side seams of the sleeves and all of the side seams of the skirts. And then the same thing for the skirt lining and the bodice lining. And then I'm also going to finish off all of my seams with my serger just to give it a nice crisp finish, and also because this fabric tends to fray. And like I always say, if you don't have a serger, you can use any other kind of seam finish. We're also going to give all of those seams a nice press so that they're just ready to all be attached together and match up. Whenever you are planning to add a zipper to a project, you are always going to want to leave the seam that zipper is going to go into partially open. So for example, with this dress, the zipper is going to be on the side of the dress, therefore it's going to fit into part of the side seam of the skirt. So on my left side of my skirt, I'm going to leave part of that seam open to attach the zipper later on. Now that all of my seams are connected, we are going to start attaching the lining to the skirt just by pinning it together, matching up those side seams, and doing a quick basting stitch so that we can come back in later on and add all of our pleats. So the purpose of basting is to loosely and lightly attach pieces of fabric together so that it doesn't shift on you as you continue to adapt it and mold it for your project. So in order to do this, you want to set your machine on a basting stitch, which is either going to be a 4.0 or 5.0. Really, it's the highest number for your stitch width, and this just widens your stitches, makes them super loose. You don't even have to backstitch on a basting stitch. It's a super easy, quick stitch to just make sure your fabric doesn't move on you as you continue to mold it into what shape and size you want it to be for your project. Now that my lining is attached to my skirt, I went ahead and just serged the bottom of my skirt for both the lining and the outer shell of the skirt so that it would be a quick hem later on. I'm then going to sew my cuffs together by placing them right sides together and sewing the side seam at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. This way it creates a full circle that fits over your hand. And then I'm eventually going to press those in half, press in the sides, and sew it around the bottom of my sleeve. So after my cuffs are done, I'm then going to add in a basting stitch to the bottom of both of my sleeves so that I can pull that basting stitch and gather it. So again, set your machine to the highest stitch width. Don't backstitch, leave some tails so that you can pull them and gather up the bottoms to then add in your cuffs. The next step of the cuffs is to press my seam open, and then I'm going to press in my raw edges a 1/2 inch, and then I'm going to press my cuffs in half so that they become half of their size, and this is going to kind of create an avenue or a cavern that my gathered bottom of my sleeve is going to fit into, and then my cuffs are essentially going to sandwich those gathers together to be sewn up and then create this really nice delicate edge of your sleeve. Next, we are going to gather the bottom edge of our sleeve, so we're going to do this by pulling the tails on the wrong side of our fabric very loosely and gently all the way around our sleeve so that we bunch it and gather it up, and we're going to pull it till the bottom of our sleeve is the same circumference as our cuff. After the bottom edge of our sleeve is all gathered, we are just going to stick that into the crevice or cavern of your cuff so that it sandwiches all of those gathered edges together. And you're just going to pin that around the cuff, and then that is where you're going to add your seam right along the edge. So this part was a little tricky, getting all of those gathers into this super tiny cuff, but after a while of finessing it, it finally worked out and it ended up looking beautiful once it was all said and done. Bodice. So this is just where I'm inserting my elastic into that channel, pinning it into place, and then sewing it into place so it doesn't shift on me as I continue my process. And this is what's going to allow the sleeves to fit really nicely and kind of give them that nice poofy effect. So now it's time to attach the two pieces together, and this is where the sandwiching comes into effect. So I match up the under seam of the sleeve to the side seam of the bodice, and then I sandwich the lining on top of that. That way I'm sewing 3 layers at once, so then when I flip the lining to the inside, all of my raw edges and seams are hidden on the inside of my lining. So this is how I ended up attaching my sleeves for this dress, because I just wanted to make my job extra confusing. And then at the same time, I also went ahead and sewed across the top of the bodice, across the front and the back. That way my entire lining will be attached to the bodice once my sleeves are attached at the same time. So it's important that when you're lining something, you always make sure that your right sides are together. That way when you create your seam and sew it together and then flip it right side out, there will be no seam showing and everything will be nice and finished. So this is the process I ended up doing for this bodice, since I wanted it to be lined and also since I wanted all of my seams to be hidden on the inside. So now I'm just going to sew where all of my pins are, which means I'm sewing across the top of my bodice, I'm sewing under my arms, attaching my sleeves, and I'm sewing across the back of my bodice. And then after all of these seams are put into place, I can flip my lining to the inside, and then everything will be nice and finished for my bodice. Once my lining is all sewn, I'm going to flip it right side out and give all those seams a nice press. So the reason why I decided to go with the side invisible zipper rather than a back zipper is that side invisible zippers easily fit within the side seam of dresses or any garment you're adding them to, so it's really not even noticeable that the garment even has a zipper, even though it's a lot more tricky to kind of insert them that way. But I really like what it did and how it looked for this dress, and because my zipper is on the side and it's right under the armhole, I also sewed up the top of my zipper just so I would have kind of a full armhole to attach my sleeve to it. Because of how I did the side invisible zipper, my second sleeve wasn't actually able to be attached until after the other sleeve was attached and the zipper was inserted. So now we're going to go ahead and attach the second sleeve, matching up that side seam or the side invisible zipper to the underseam of that sleeve, and then also taking the leftover lining fabric and sandwiching that on top of the sleeve so that all of our seams will be nice and hidden on the inside. So now we have our side invisible zipper and also our second sleeve attached. So now it's time to just finish attaching all of the lining, which means a lot of hand stitching is in play. So we have to hand stitch the lining down along the sides of the zipper, and then we're also going to fold under the bottom edge of that bodice lining and hand stitch it along the waistline. So this is something that you could do on your machine. You don't even have to attach your lining this way. You could have done it all on the machine to start with, but I wanted the inside of this dress to look as professional as possible, so I went the extra mile and did something that I don't typically do, which is hand sew, and I'm actually really happy with how it turned out because it ended up looking very crisp and clean at the end. So after fitting the dress to myself and one of my mannequins off camera, I ended up shifting my sleeves just about a ½ inch in on the front and the back. It wasn't that big of a deal and I didn't have to do that much adapting, it was just tacking it into a new spot. Another fun part about this project is that this is my first project with my custom tags. So I got tags created, actually designed them myself, then got them made to sew into all of my future projects. So I'm really excited that I got to put this tag in this dress. It definitely gives it a very professional touch and it has my name. So one of the last steps in this process is to finish pinning down the lining over the waist seam of this dress, and then once it's pinned into place I will hand stitch that off camera, but I will show you what all of the hand stitching ended up looking like on the lining. So the last thing I did was to hand stitch down all of the lining on the inside so that there wouldn't be any seams on the outside and it would be very nice and finished. This is probably the most professional finishing I've ever done. So I just stitched it all down along the zipper so that it would be all nice and finished on the inside, and I stitched it over all of the pleats around the waist. So the inside is absolutely beautiful. We got our fabulous tag. So it is all done and ready to wrap up and gift.
I'm nervous. So I don't know if you remember it.
Wait!
Yeah. Oh my god, and you made it?
Yeah.